Hello scholars, welcome to Dakshinai classroom. In the last lecture, we talked about the composition of nucleus, that a nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. We also talked about shape of the nucleus, that a nucleus is almost spherical shape. There is a little variation, but for general purpose we can take it spherical. We also talked about what is the radius of nucleus. Then we talked about density of the nucleus, that a nuclear density is almost same for every element. We also talked about different types of nuclei, that is isotopes, isobars, isotones and so on. So last lecture was basic understanding of nucleus. In today's lecture, that is the second lecture for nuclei topic, we will be taking a little more detailed look inside the nucleus and the workings of the nucleus. So let us take a look at what are the subtopics which we will talk about in today's lecture. So first topic which we are going to talk about is nuclear force. Now some of you might have studied this. Nuclear force is one of the four fundamental forces of nature. Second thing which we will talk about is mass energy equivalence. Mass energy equivalence. Now what is mass energy equivalence? There is a one very famous equation about mass energy equivalence. Everybody has heard of it, but we will come to that equation later. After seeing what is mass energy equivalence, we will come to mass defect. There is something called mass defect. We will talk about what is that. After mass defect, we will see what is called binding energy. Now some of you might have studied this binding energy in chemistry maybe, but today we will talk about binding energy from the nucleus perspective. And fifth topic which we will talk about is stability of nucleus. Stability of nucleus. Why some nucleus is stable while the others are unstable, and what makes the nucleus stable or unstable. So these are the 5 topics which we are going to study in today's lecture. Now, as we have seen in the last lecture, that a nucleus is made up of mainly neutrons and protons. So let us take an example. Let us consider helium nucleus. There are 2 neutrons and 2 protons. Now we know that gravitational force is acting between all the particles, and electrostatic repulsion is acting between protons and protons because both of them are positive charge. Now, if there is a repulsion force between protons and protons, nucleus should split apart. It should blow apart. Why? Because the protons and protons are trying to repel each other. Now, but that does not happen, meaning there must be some other kind of force which is keeping the nucleus together even if there is repulsion between protons and protons. Now, you may say that, sir, there is a gravitational force is working. But if you have studied in the forces, gravitational force is very weaker than electrostatic force or Coulomb force. So gravitational force is not enough to keep the nucleus together. We need another force. So that another force which is keeping the nucleus together despite of electrostatic repulsion or Coulomb force repulsion between protons and protons, that force is what? That force is nuclear force. So there are few properties of nuclear force which we will talk about in this topic. Now, the first and very first priority of nuclear force is, now see, in the helium nucleus there are 2 protons and 2 neutrons. While electrostatic repulsion is trying to blow the nucleus apart, the nuclear force is keeping it together. Then obviously nuclear force is greater than electrostatic repulsion. So inside a nucleus, remember, inside a nucleus, the strength of nuclear force is much greater than your Coulomb force or electrostatic repulsion force. So the first thing which you should remember about nuclear force is nuclear force Fn is very greater than electrostatic force, or for that matter electrostatic is greater than gravitational. So nuclear force is the strongest of four fundamental forces inside the nucleus. Now second thing, remember there are two neutrons and two protons. Now while electrostatic force is the property of charge, if there is no charge on a particle, there can be no electrostatic force or Coulomb force. Now, does nuclear force depends upon charge? No. Nuclear force is your independent of charge. Meaning, what is the meaning of independent of charge? Now see, inside a nucleus, helium nucleus, neutron, neutron, proton, proton. So while Coulomb force operates only between proton and proton, nuclear force can act between a neutron and a proton, between a proton and a proton, and between a neutron and a neutron. Nuclear force can act between any two nucleons. Does not matter whether it is neutron, neutron, proton, proton, and neutron and proton. Any pair you take, there will be a nuclear force acting between them. Does not matter whether they are having zero charge or they both have positive charge. Nuclear force remains same. So what you will say? Independent of charge. Charge does not matter. Charge of the nucleon does not matter. So force between a proton is almost same as force between a neutron is almost same as force between a neutron proton. So while you talk about nuclear force, its value remains same. Does not matter which pair you are talking about, whether it is proton, neutron, or neutron, any pair, its value remains same. Now, third thing which you should know about nuclear force is, it is always attractive. Nuclear force is attractive force. Now, if you go very small length, then it may be repulsive, but we won't go to that. It is attractive. So nuclear force is attractive in nature. Now to elaborate it a little bit, let us take a look at a graph. Now if you take a look at this graph here, this graph represents potential energy between two nucleons with respect to distance between those two particles. Now if you pay attention, the very minimum potential energy. Now if you remember, lower the potential energy, more is the attractive force between two particles. So the minimum potential energy is how much? Is at what distance? Is at around 0.8 Fermi meter. Meaning, and beyond that, see, beyond that potential energy starts to increase and it levels out at 0. And if you go closer to 0.8 Fermi meter, meaning if you take two nucleons and bring them closer than 0.8, then this force becomes repulsive. You cannot take two particles, two nucleons, and keep them closer than 0.8. So what is the conclusion? Beyond 0.8 Fermi meter, if your radius or your R is the distance between two nucleons. If R is greater than 0.8 Fermi meter, it is still attractive. If R is greater than 0.8, it starts attractive, and if R is less than 0.8 Fermi meter, then see, if you keep R less than 0.8, your potential energy starts increasing, meaning your force is now what? It is repulsive force. So for R less than 0.8, it will be repulsive force. And there is one more very crucial observation which you can derive from this graph is, if you pay attention, when I take the distance beyond few Fermi-meter, let us observe more than 2 Fermi-meter. So beyond 2 Fermi-meter or 3 Fermi-meter, potential energy becomes 0 and it remains 0. It is not changing. So when potential energy becomes 0 and it remains 0, meaning what? Meaning your force becomes 0. So if you place the distance between two nucleons beyond few Fermi-meters, like let's say 2 Fermi-meters, then your nuclear force will not operate. Meaning कि for 1 Fermi-meter it will be very strong force, and for beyond 2 Fermi-meter it will suddenly drop to 0. Meaning your nuclear force is a very short range force. It only works when distance between two nucleons is of the order of few Fermi-meters. Let's say 1 Fermi-meter or 2 Fermi-meter. That is your distance should be. So it is a short range force. Short range force. It only works inside the nucleus. For example, R is not radius, R is distance between two nucleons. R should be of the order of Fermi-meter, 10 to the power minus 15 meter. So that is your nuclear force. These are the properties of your nuclear force. You can take note. Now let us try to solve a very basic question based upon our understanding of nuclear force. What is the question? Two protons are kept. Two protons, they are nucleons, so no problem. Two protons are kept at a separation of 10 nanometer. Which of the following is true? Now, nuclear force is the strongest force, but it only applies for a very short distance. It only works when the distance between two nucleons is of the order of Fermi-meter, meaning 10 to the power minus 15. That too, let us say 2 Fermi-meter, maximum 3 Fermi-meter, not more than that. So what is the distance here? The distance R here is 10 nanometer. 10 nanometer, 10 to the power minus 9 meter. That will be how much? 10 nanometer, 10 into 10 to the power minus 9 meter. If you want to write in case of Fermi-meter, then you will have to write like this: 10 to the power 7 into 10 to the power minus 15 meter, or 10 to the power 7 Fermi-meter. So nuclear force works for what? Like 2 Fermi-meter. And what is the distance here? 10 to the power 7 Fermi-meter. So for such a large distance, nuclear force will drop to 0, immediately 0. So beyond 2 Fermi-meter, nuclear force becomes 0. Before 2 Fermi-meter, nuclear force will be the strongest force, stronger than electromagnetic force. So if this distance was of the order of, let's say, 1 Fermi-meter, then your option would have been this: nuclear force is very, very greater than electromagnetic force. But the distance here is this, so this is the wrong option. What will be the correct option? This will be the correct option, that electromagnetic force is very, very greater than nuclear force. Why? Because your distance is beyond the range of nuclear force. And what is the range of nuclear force? You can take as 2 Fermi-meter. Now let's talk about mass energy equivalence. Now it is a very broad topic. You can study a lot under this, but we will take a look at only within our scope of study. Now, as you know, Albert Einstein was a great scientist and he gave a lot of papers. So according to a special theory of relativity as given by Sir Albert Einstein, energy, what you call energy, is nothing but a form of matter, or matter is nothing but a form of energy. Before Albert Einstein, mass was taken as a different entity and energy was taken as a different entity. Energy and mass were separate things. But Albert Einstein, in his special theory of relativity, proved that mass and energy are not two different things. Mass and energy are similar things, just another form of energy. So what is mass energy equivalence? According to mass energy equivalence, mass is just another form of energy, another form of energy. Now we will take a look at it, a little bit more detailed look. Now, what is the meaning of this? Meaning of this is that you can convert mass into energy and you can also convert energy into mass. Theoretically speaking, practically we have not achieved converting energy into mass. So theoretically speaking, mass can be converted into energy. Mass can be converted into energy and vice versa. Meaning reverse is also true, that energy can be converted into mass. Now there are two most important equations based on this, that is mass can be converted into energy and energy can be converted into mass. Now let us say you have mass m and you want to convert that entire mass into energy, like electromagnetic wave energy or photon, that energy. So what you will get? So first equation, which is the most famous equation, that if you have mass m, then how much energy that mass is equivalent of. Meaning if I convert this entire mass into energy, then how much energy I will get. So that was given by Einstein as m times c square. Meaning if you multiply mass with square of c, what is c? C is the speed of light. So if you multiply your mass with square of c square, that will give you energy equivalent of that mass. Meaning this much mass is equivalent of this much energy. So that is mc square equals E. Yeah, E equals mc square. Everybody must have heard of it. Now, there is another equation which is not that much famous. That is, suppose there is a cricket ball. Cricket ball is in my hand. It has some energy. And if I throw the cricket ball with 100 meter per second, 100 meter per second is a very fast speed, but let's say I throw the cricket ball with 100 meter per second. What happened to the energy of the cricket ball? Energy of the cricket ball is obviously increased. And according to Albert Einstein, mass is just another form of energy. So if you increase the energy of anything, does that affect the mass of that object? So for that, there is another very famous, this equation is not that famous, but in science circles, the equation is also known. What is it? If you throw a particle of rest mass m, what is the rest mass? When its velocity is 0, that is rest mass. Mass of any particle when its speed is 0, that is rest mass. So if you throw a particle with rest mass m naught with a speed v, then mass of that particle is no longer same. The mass of that particle changes. Meaning I had a cricket ball with rest mass 1 kg. I threw it with 100 meter per second. Then while traveling with 100 meter per second, mass of that cricket ball will change. How much will that mass be? Let us say rest mass was m naught. So m naught divided by under root of 1 minus v square divided by c square, where m naught is the rest mass, meaning mass when it was at rest. V is the speed of the ball, 100 meter per second, that speed. C is the speed of light. So if I throw our m naught with v speed, then its mass becomes this. m equals m naught divided by under root of 1 minus v square by c square. Meaning, if you change the energy of an object, then its mass also changes. So these are the only two equations you should be concerned about. Beyond that, you need not delve deep into mass energy equivalence. That much should be enough. So let us talk about what is mass defect. So see, our nucleus is made up of protons and neutrons. So you might expect that the total mass of protons plus neutron will be equal to total mass of nucleus. For example, let us say there is a wall and that wall is made up of 1000 bricks. Then total mass of the wall must be equal to total mass of 1000 bricks. That should be the observation. So let us test this theory on oxygen nucleus. So let us consider an particular isotope of oxygen, that is O8-16. There are 8 protons and 8 neutrons. So what should be the total mass? Total mass should be 8 protons plus 8 neutrons, like this. Now, so 8 times, what is the mass of a proton? Mass of a proton is 1.00727 atomic mass unit. I am writing in atomic mass unit, not in gram or kilogram and so. Now, and what should be mass of a neutron? 8 times 1.00866 atomic mass units. When you solve this, you will get 8 times 2.01593. Solve this. Now, when you expand this, you will get 16.12744. So this is the expected mass of this particular oxygen isotope. This is the expected mass of the nucleus. Now, how do you actually measure the mass? So the actual mass can be measured through spectrometry. Now, when you actually measure the mass, actual mass of this oxygen nucleus through spectrometry, that comes out to be 15.99053 atomic mass unit. This is an approximate value. In some books, it may be given slightly different, does not matter. So this is the actual value, this is the expected value. So as you can see, there is a slight difference between actual value and expected value. So delta M you can write expected value minus actual value. So 16.12744 minus 15.99053. This will come in atomic mass unit. So you will get approximately 0.13691 AMU. So this much mass difference is there between the total mass of the constituents, what a nucleus is made up of, and the actual mass of the nucleus. So this difference is what you call mass defect. So what you will write as the definition of mass defect? Mass defect is nothing but difference between mass of a nucleus and total mass of its constituents particles. So what are the constituent particles here? 8 protons and 8 neutrons. What is the total mass of constituent particles? This much atomic mass unit. And what is the mass of nucleus? This is the actual mass of nucleus. And the difference between these two, that is your mass defect. So let us say I have a compound X with atomic number Z and mass number A. Then what is the number of neutrons? Number of neutrons, you can write capital N, which is equal to A minus Z, like this. So what is the delta M? What is the mass defect? So here delta M you can write as, what is the total mass of constituent particles? Total mass of constituent particle will be mass of a proton. Mass of a proton. Sometimes it is also written as mass of a hydrogen nucleus. So a normal hydrogen nucleus is nothing but one proton. So both are same thing. Mass of a proton or mass of a hydrogen nucleus. Both are same. So MP multiplied by Z. Z is number of protons. Plus mass of a neutron multiplied by, in some books it is written A minus Z, in some it is written N. So let us say A minus Z, number of neutrons. So this is total mass of constituent particles minus capital M. Capital M is the actual mass of your nucleus. So this is your mass defect. Now we will see where did that mass go. So this is your mass defect. Now a very important concept related to mass defect is that of binding energy. Now what is binding energy? Let's say in chemistry you must have studied, if a chemical reaction is spontaneous, then its Gibbs free energy must be negative. Now on the same basis, let's say there are 8 protons and 8 neutrons. These 8 protons and 8 neutrons were separate. So if these 8 protons and 8 neutrons are coming together to form a new entity. Now if that equation has to be spontaneous, automatic, without any help. So if that equation or that formation of new nucleus, if that process has to be spontaneous, then energy must be released. So what is binding energy? So binding energy is when, in case 8 protons and 8 neutrons are coming together to form a new nucleus, then some amount of energy will be released in this formation. So that energy released is called binding energy. So what you will call, when the constituent particles come together to form a new nucleus, some amount of energy is released. So what you will say? When nucleons come together to form a nucleus, some energy is released in the formation. This energy is called binding energy. Now why it is called binding energy, we will take a look. So 8 protons and 8 neutrons, they came together to form the nucleus of oxygen. So some amount of energy will be released in that process, in the formation process, and that energy released is your binding energy. Now from where that energy is released? Who released that energy? Now if you remember, we have just talked about mass defect, meaning the mass of constituent particles is more than mass of the nucleus, meaning 8 protons plus 8 neutrons. They came together to form oxygen, but their mass is slightly greater than oxygen nucleus mass. So we were wondering, where did that mass go? This was your mass defect. Their total mass is greater than oxygen total mass. Where did that mass go? What happened to that mass? What happened to that mass defect? So that difference in mass, that mass which was less in the final nucleus, that mass is released in the form of binding energy. So if you want to know what is the value of binding energy, meaning if a nucleus is formed and you want to know what is the binding energy of that nucleus, then what you need to do? You need to just calculate binding energy as how much? First find the delta M. First find the mass defect of that nucleus. What is mass defect? Difference between actual mass and expected mass. So delta M, and according to Einstein's equation, if I multiply delta M from C square, that I will get as energy. So this will be your energy, binding energy in case of any nucleus. So the easiest way to calculate binding energy is just find the mass defect and then multiply it by C square. Now this seems, now remember, in this equation delta M is in the form of kg, but when we were talking about binding energy, when we were talking about mass defect, we calculated delta M in the form of atomic mass unit. So to make the process easy, you can remember as 1 atomic mass unit. If you have mass equal to 1 atomic mass unit, so that mass energy equivalent will be approximately 931.5 mega electron volt. Meaning if you convert 1 atomic mass unit into entire energy, so that energy will be how much? 931.5 mega electron volt. So that is your binding energy. When you make a new nucleus, from its constituent particles, some amount of energy is released. That energy is your binding energy. Why that energy is released? Because final product is slightly lighter than the total mass of original ingredients. Now, what if you want to break your nucleus? Now, when in the formation energy is released, so if you want to break that nucleus, for example, I have an oxygen nucleus. I have an oxygen 816. Now, if I want to separate each proton, each neutron, each separate, then what will happen? Then how I can separate? So, if in the formation energy was released, then obviously during the separation energy would be consumed. How much energy will be consumed? Equal to binding energy. Meaning, if you want to separate a nucleus into its constituent particles, you want to separate 8 neutrons, exact, separate. Then you will have to provide energy. You will have to supply energy equal to your binding energy. Now let us solve a question based on binding energy. Now it is given that obtain binding energy of nitrogen 14 from following data. What is the data given? Mass of a proton is given in 1.00783 atomic mass unit. Mass of a neutron is given as 1.00867 atomic mass unit. Mass of a neutron is slightly greater than mass of a proton. And then given as actual mass of nitrogen 14 is how much? 14.00307 atomic mass unit. Now, when you solve this, now how to get the binding energy? So why the binding energy actually occurs? Because final product is slightly lighter than the original ingredients. So what is the final product? This. What are the ingredients? These. So what you will say? First you will find delta mass or the mass defect. How you will find mass defect? total mass of ingredients. What is the ingredient? 7 protons, 7 neutrons. So 7, or take common, 1.00783 plus 1.00867. This is mass of ingredients minus mass of the actual product. What is the mass of actual product? 14.00307. So this will give you mass defect. So what will you will get? You will get this approximately 0.11193 atomic mass unit. This will be approximate mass defect in case of your formation of nitrogen 14 from 7 protons and 7 neutrons. And as you know, binding energy is nothing but mass defect in the form of energy. This mass defect is released in the form of binding energy. So what will be the binding energy? Binding energy EB will be equal to, now remember, this is in the form of atomic mass unit, not gram nor kilogram. You cannot multiply it by C square. So what I will do? 0.11193 atomic mass unit, and 1 atomic mass unit is equivalent to how much? 931.5 mega electron volt. This value you should remember. So this will be 931.5 mega electron volt. So that will be your binding energy. When you solve this, this will come out to be approximately 104.3 mega electron volt. What is the meaning of this value? The meaning of this value is, if you have 7 protons separate and if you have 7 neutrons separate, and you bring those 7 protons and 7 neutrons together to form a nucleus of nitrogen 14, this particular isotope of nitrogen, then some amount of energy will be released. And how much is that energy? How much energy will be released? This amount of energy will be released by forming this nucleus. So that is your binding energy. So when we talk about the formation of nucleus, we saw how during the formation of nucleus some amount of energy is released. Now, as you might have studied in chemistry, when a product is formed, it is not necessary that that product will stay at its. Meaning, if a nucleus is formed, it is not necessary that that system, that formation of nucleus is stable. Stable meaning? Stable means it will remain as it is. Unstable, it will try to change its characteristics or its composition in order to become more stable. So, when we talk about nuclei, then some of those nuclei are stable. They want to remain as they are. While others, they are not stable. They want to change their composition in order to become more stable. Now, how do you know which nucleus will be stable, which nucleus will not be stable? Or how stable? There is no plus or 1 or 0. There is no that stable, unstable. There is a series, meaning some of them are more stable, some of them are less stable, some of them are more unstable, like this. So there is no this and that, either stable or unstable. You have to grade. Some of them will be more stable, some of them will be less stable. Now there are multiple parameters based on which you can tell whether a nucleus is stable or not, or more accurately, how stable that nucleus is. So in that regard, binding energy is energy which was released during the formation. That binding energy is a very useful tool when you talk about stability of a nucleus, or more precisely, binding energy per nucleon. Binding energy per nucleon. Now what is binding energy per nucleon? EB was the energy, binding energy released during the formation of a nucleus. And if mass number is what? Total number of nucleons. If mass number of that nucleus is A, then EB, which is binding energy divided by mass number, that will be your binding energy per nucleon. So binding energy per nucleon is a very useful tool in order to determine that how stable a nucleus is. Now remember, just binding energy cannot be taken, because bigger nucleus will release more energy. That does not mean it is more stable. So a more accurate parameter will be binding energy per nucleon. Now, if you look at the graph here, there is a graph of binding energy per nucleon versus mass number. There is a comparison between binding energy per nucleon and mass number. So when you take a look on this graph, you can make few observations. What are those observations? So first observation you can make is, when you take a look at the graph here, for mass number 30 to 170, binding energy per nucleon is almost same. There is a slight variation, but almost same. So binding energy per nucleon is almost same for 30 less than mass number, which is less than 170. In this range, from 30 to 170, this is almost same. Now, maximum, where it is maximum? So EBN, binding energy per nucleon, is maximum for which element? For iron, iron 56. For iron, binding energy per nucleon is maximum, this particular isotope of iron. Now, there is one more observation you can make from here. On the left side of 30, meaning for mass number less than 30, binding energy is low. Binding energy is less than iron. And for mass number greater than 170, binding energy is less. So what I will write? Binding energy per nucleon is lower for what? For mass number less than 30 and for mass number greater than 170. Meaning if your mass number is beyond 170 or below 30, then your binding energy is lower. Now, what is the conclusion that you can draw from here? The conclusion you can draw is binding energy per nucleon is a parameter to measure how stable a nucleus is. Meaning, if there are two nuclei and you want to compare which one of them is more stable, which one of them is less stable, then what you can do is, you can calculate binding energy per nucleon for both nuclei, and whichever has higher binding energy per nucleon, that nucleus will be more stable, and whichever has lower binding energy per nucleon, that nucleus will be less stable. So if you look at the graph here, and from the observation, maximum binding energy per nucleon is for iron. So which nucleus should be most stable? So iron nucleus is your most stable. Now remember, as I said, there is no strict deviation that either stable or unstable. There is nothing like that. There is a gradient. You can compare. You cannot say that this is unstable, this is stable. There is always compare. Some are more stable than other. So that way you can judge the stability of the nucleus based on binding energy per nucleon. Now let us say, just now we had calculated binding energy for oxygen, which was 16 mass number, and that binding energy came out to be how much? Approximately 127.4 mega electron volt. So this was the approximate value of binding energy for oxygen. Now binding energy per nucleon will be how much? So binding energy per nucleon, this will be 127.4 divided by how many number of nucleons are there? 16. So 16. So this will be how much? 7.97 approximately. So approximately 7.97 mega electron volt. That is your binding energy per nucleon. Now if you take a look, then binding energy per nucleon for iron is how much? Approximately 8.85 mega electron volt. That is the maximum value. So now let us compare. Now you cannot say, sir, oxygen is unstable. What you can say is, sir, iron is more stable than oxygen, or oxygen nucleus is less stable than iron nucleus. You cannot say that it is absolutely stable. This is absolutely unstable, not like this. You always tell the stability of the nucleus as a comparison. Then this is more stable than that, or this is more unstable than that, like this. So this was your lecture 2 on nuclei. We talked about mass defect, binding energy, stability, nuclear force. In the next lecture, we will talk about what happens when a nucleus tries to gain more stability. For example, a nucleus is feeling that, okay, I am not enough stable. So what it can do to become more stable, that we will talk about in the next lecture.